Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, am I audible? Thank you. So, a very, very interesting discussion since morning, and thank you, Anilji, for organizing this, and all the speakers who preceded us. It makes our job more challenging, on two counts. One is, you have already heard a lot. Second is, this is a pre-lunch session, right? We have to stick to time, and we can't keep you from lunch. Okay, so, we have heard a lot about growth, the impact of COVID, what HR's role is going to be, how it's going to drive growth, etc. What we thought, and I take this liberty to represent my panel, what we thought is we'll try and make it a little more interesting for you. First is the supposition that HR has not transformed today, and I take some nuggets from what Dr. Rath said before me. HR has always been there, and it has been doing with what it's supposed to do. The visibility of what HR creates as an impact has never been more evident as much as in the last 1.5 years. That's the first point that I put before you. How that impacts, we'll discuss here. The second, the topic says new competencies of HR to drive growth agenda. The second submission which I have to put before you humbly is there are no new competencies which HR has, right? What we're probably going to talk about is how competencies which were earlier probably not so important have become more important, and how the impact of that changes in this changed world that we're talking about. That's probably the second thing that we'll focus on. Okay, let's come back and look at this whole piece about growth and what we're talking today. Couple of submissions. First, look at how the industry has shaped not over the last 5 years, 10 years or 15 years, but let's look at a 200 or a 300-year period, right? The world was primarily an agriculture-driven economy, and then your industrial revolution came, right? Psychologically, like everything which changes, there is a huge resistance. So people said industry will not work and agriculture will always remain the primary source. There is a resistance to the impact it will have on the skilling, it will have on employment. Machines will take away the jobs, right? But it happened. The world adapted, humankind adapted, and now it's taken for granted. The point I'm trying to make is change is inevitable. Human beings as a race have always adapted to change. They've adapted to cataclysmic change. Probably far more cataclysmic than what we are seeing in the last 1.5 years. So my humble submission as part of this discussion would be that while there's a lot of change, it is not something which the human race has not seen before. So that's the second point. The third point which I'd like to put before you, and I'll quote my mother for this. She's 87 years old now, and last year when this entire COVID pandemic was raging, and people of our generation and the generation below us, our children, were very unsure of what's going to happen. There's widespread insecurity. The first lockdown had happened, and nobody knew how the future would look like. She was the most stoic person, and she said, I don't know why you guys are so worried. Because in our time, when I was a child, I saw World War II, and we used to eat rice, which was a waste rice, and we are very grateful for it, right? Then we went into independence, and we saw partition and all that which has a then we saw the China war, we saw the Pakistan war, we have seen epidemics. I don't understand why everybody is so scared about the future. It's inevitable that there will be some distress, but what it goes around, it will come around. So you need to have resilience. Probably what we are also going to bring out through our discussions is how does HR in its current role to support development bring in some of those aspects back into the workplace. If the kind of insecurity that we went through, especially generations which have not seen any kind of cataclysmic changes, if they go back to work tomorrow, and they're already back at work, what does HR need to do to give the psychological boost? How do we provide that security that they feel secure? Nobody has seen the kind of mass job losses in their lives that we saw in the last 1.5 years. If you want the people to come back and be as productive, as sure, as confident they were about giving to industry and getting it back, what is the paradigm that we as industry have to create where they get the same kind of emotional security back when they're back at work? Couple of things from my side, and I see as trends. The first is HR has to focus hugely on how we translate the current work practices, which gives more surety and security back to your population. How do we do that? Of course, we have all been talking about a lot of psychological interventions, counseling, etc., which has grown more than tenfold in the last 1.5 years in organizations. But besides that, what are the kind of policies that we need to put in place which provide some kind of a security to individual that my job is secure, right? The company is going to probably take away my job only if there's no alternative. But till the time there's an alternative, I've got multiple options. The second is how does the company commit itself to my welfare? We talked about people crashing their infrastructure to make profits, which is fine. Every organization has a responsibility to the stakeholder. But how do you keep aside and channel some of those resources aside for the people who are working for you? There has to be a very, very demonstrable impact of what companies believe in, and they need to communicate it to their employees to do this. One of the things which I see, which is coming back personally, about 20 years back, the compensation and benefits philosophy of organization changed, especially in India, right? We went to cash components. Everybody talked about cash in hand. So if you looked at the earlier traditional companies, they would give you a house, they would give you medical facilities, they'll probably even give you a gardener to look after, your kitchen garden. You would have cars, you would have peons, you would have periodicals, it was hugely benefit loaded, what you used to see if I go back 25 years, all good organizations. Then we came to the Western way of compensating, which was about cash in hand. So most organizations discarded their benefits, cashed it out and gave it in the hands of the individual, which was right, because every individual has the right to earn and spend and invest the way they want to. It's about putting value in the individual's judgment. However, with what has now happened, especially about the middle income families and the lower income families where there are single bread earners, sudden job losses have brought home the fact that you need to have some kind of a kitty that you can fall back upon, which is not on a day-to-day, month-to-month earnings. It's not about month-to-month servicing of EMIs. You don't take a 20-year loan for your houses and 2 houses and 2 cars, 5-year loans on your cars, which you expect to service through your earnings, which will come continuously for the next, it's guaranteed, right? So that's one lesson that the workforce has learned. And as HR people, I think it's one of our lessons that we have learned, that we need to configure our compensation strategies back into place where there is some element of social security, right? That's a trend that seems to be the ask. Compared to 10 people that we interviewed earlier and said that we are going to keep aside something for your pension plan, would you want to do that? The answer now, 10 of 10 says yes, where earlier probably it would have been 3 out of 10, right? So that's the second piece. The third piece is, we have heard a lot about technology. Technology is not something new, right? Even before COVID hit, and for the last 5 years, we have been hearing the kind of pace which AI and ML is taking. And this whole discussions about how job losses will happen and technology will take over employment of people has been rampant. I think those principles don't change. 25 years back, when you had your ambassador car or your Fiat car, there was not a single iota of technology in that, right? It was all about mechanical parts. 50% of your car today is driven by chips and chip-based technology. Same cars. When it started, the auto industry was up in arms, mostly in Europe, stating that the moment you computerize my cars, there will be job losses and employment will go down. It never happened. What happened was skills were re-articulated, right? One kind of skills go out and you have to acquire skills, and those skills take over. Employment per se, the numbers don't go down. That still holds true. So as HR, again, our responsibility is to see how we address this whole skilling portion, right? So here is the backdrop in which probably I will do the discussions. We are looking at HR as not having new competencies, but putting focus on the competencies which have now come to the fore. We will assume that HR was never away from the seat of the table. HR was always there. The results are not as immediate as, let's say, production or manufacturing lines or finance for that matter, where you can see the results immediately, but it has always been something which has been critical to an organization's success, right? So that still is there, but how do we manifest it? The third is, how do we change some of our strategies? Rather, reprioritize some of our strategies in the changing scenario, whether we call it with a technology intervention, whether we bring the point of organizations battling sudden global impacts like this, etc. Sound good?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.